Hey, and welcome back. I'm Colton from Ankeny Van Builds, and today we're going to be installing probably my favorite thing to install in a van, and that is the flooring. Flooring just changes the entire look and feel of the van. It's one of the first things I'm going to be putting in that actually is going to make this place feel like a home. So that being said, let me tell you all the tools that are required to put these in, and let's just jump right into it. So obviously the first thing you're going to need is the flooring that you want. I decided to go with this applewood laminate flooring. One, obviously because they're beautiful floors, but two things that you absolutely need in a van are floors that are waterproof and scratch resistant. So I got these, they come in this kind of box. It's important when you're storing these to keep them in a temperature controlled area. So don't leave them in your garage if your garage isn't heated or doesn't have air conditioning, because they, like most materials, will expand or contract. And what you don't want, especially for me, being that it's almost winter, is to store them somewhere cold and for it to later warm up and expand and start to buckle as it gets hotter. That's what you don't want to do. So we're going to avoid that today, and I'll show you how I do that. But next up, tool wise, because we're in a van and nothing is straight, we're going to need a jigsaw to cut some awkward angles and weird curves to match the inside of the van. Obviously you're going to need, like everything, a tape measure and a pencil, a drill with some screws, and I'll show you why. This is unique to a van. You wouldn't really do this when putting floors into a house, but I'll show you why later. Also, you're going to need this T-track molding and try to get it in the same style or same pattern as your flooring so it doesn't stick out. And in fact, on the box it says, do not forget your molding. Okay? Next up, you're going to need some sort of speed square or framing square, or really anything with a straight edge, to make sure you're getting your lines nice and straight and making sure that your floors aren't crooked in the van, because what you don't want is to get halfway through putting the floors in and notice the entire thing is crooked. So to avoid that, get everything laid out, planned out, nice and square. And then to install it, you need a hammer. It's better to have a rubber mallet, but I don't have one. So I will use a normal hammer and a scrap piece of this laminate to flush these boards together so that they don't move. And the last thing that you're going to need is a way to cut all of these. So there's special tools that you can buy that snap and cut laminate floors, or you could just use a miter saw, which is what I have, and that's what I'm going to be using. Oh, I also forgot, don't make fun of me, but these also come in super clutch when it comes to putting in floors, because you're spending almost your entire day on your knees, and that takes a toll. So don't make fun of me, but I'm going to be wearing knee pads almost all day today. So I got lucky enough that this van came with a factory subfloor already in it. So that means it is perfectly flat, it is perfectly smooth, and I can just go ahead and lay my laminate floor right on top of it. If you were to make your own subfloor, however, it is super important that you get something like a level, and you run it all the way across, and you check underneath to make sure that there's no high spots or low spots. And if you did have any high spots or low spots, you got to sand it down to make sure that the floor is completely flat before you start laying your floor in. What you don't want is to have like a dip in your floor, so when you put the laminate floors on it, that there's a gap in between the floor and the board itself, because then you're going to step on it, it's going to bend, the seams are going to come apart, it's going to buckle, and it's just not going to look good, and it's not going to last. So making sure it's perfectly flat is extremely important. Then once you make sure everything's completely flat, I'm going to obviously take this tape out, but you want to sweep up everything. You don't want any little dust particles or sand or dirt, and most likely in between each row that I do, I'm probably going to sweep up in between to make sure that every layer that I'm putting in doesn't have any dust. So next you need to find a nice straight line that you can use as a reference to start laying all your floors. And this Ram ProMaster right here on the factory subfloor has a nice straight line, and it goes all the way to the wheel well box over there. So I'm going to be using this. Now typically in a house, you could have the board butted up right against a wall, and you can use that as a stopper as you hammer in the other boards. But because this is like a grooved or a curved surface, doing that, the boards would bounce up on it, it would move, and that's why on these boards over here, because I know they're going to be covered, I'm going to lay them out so they're nice, perfectly straight, and then I'm going to put some screws into them so they don't move. Then I can start laying the rest of them, and then I'll take the screws out once I'm done. So the next thing you want to do is to find your pattern. So what I like to do, and what the goal is to not have any of these seams ever lining up. So what I like to do is I like to cut them into quarters. Some people like to do the step down, so it's like 3/4, half, quarter. I like to stagger it like this so that it's an irregular pattern, and that way the seams aren't as close in each row. So the reason I told you I'm going to be using the drill and some screws to attach this, because if I were to lay, say this was my next board, and I were to lay it down, I'd go to put it in and see how it slides and moves around. Normally in a house you can butt it right up against this and it won't move, but if I'm going to be constantly hitting things, it's going to move around quite a bit. So that's why I'm going to get it lined up nice and neat with the side here. So I'll drop some screws in to make sure it's nice and secure. Another thing I forgot to mention at the beginning is when you get to the end here, you want to make sure you're leaving at least 3/8 of an inch off the back, because you don't want your board to come all the way to the end, since we're going to need a spot for the T-mold track to go, and that T-mold is about 1/2 inch. And now with that out of the way, I can go ahead and start cleaning up the subfloor and start laying some boards down. Okay, I cannot be more excited about this. Check this out. These floors look amazing. Super happy with the design that I picked out. Now that it's all completely installed, this is going to get covered up by the wheel well box. Everything is nice and flush. You can tell my trick of screwing in the floors, once I had them all straight, worked out really nicely, because if you could tell here, all the way down, it is still perfectly straight. That means that all of these lines in the van are perfectly straight, and the job is done. Now all I need to do is get that T-mold, put it right in here in these cracks, or in the, not on the cracks, but on the ends here, cap it off, give it that nice trimmed out look, and the floors are in. The only tool I ended up using that I didn't include in the very first, or at the very beginning in this video, was a table saw. I use a table saw right at the end to rip those narrow strips on the slider door side. But other than that, just the jigsaw, the drill, and the hammer. That's all you need. Now, I don't know if you'll be able to see this with how the lighting is right now. I got the weird shade coming in, but that pattern that I was talking about before, where you want a full board, a 1/2 inch, or a half of a board, 3/4, and a quarter. Here's why: because it creates this pattern, so you can see the seams, and you want those to line up every 4th board. So if you can see that, it's kind of a minor detail. Not a lot of people know about it, but it's just one of those things that if you get it right, it just looks so much cleaner. Okay, good morning. It is the next day, and I'm gonna finish up the floors today. I putting in the trim work, this T-mold stuff, and I'm gonna build some wheel well boxes. So let's just go jump right into it. So this T-mold just comes with this aluminum track here, and it has these holes already in them. So you line those up where you want it, and this is why I left that 5/8 inch gap right here, because this is 1/2 inch wide, and I wanted just enough room to drop this in, and this T-mold will just snap right into it. And now you can see how that just completely blends in and makes it look nice and neat, so that way you're not looking at this raw edge over here. So that's simple. So to get the dimensions of the wheel well box, what I did is I got a straight edge and I measured from this back wall out till it's past my floors here. So it gives me just enough clearance to make it out past this wheel well. So I put a dot there, did the same thing on the other side, measured from point to point and from the wall to this point. So I got 10 inches here, 35 inches to the other one, and it needs to be 19.5 inches tall. So I'm gonna go ahead and start cutting some plywood. So one really common mistake a lot of people make, including myself, is when you're building boxes like this, you think, oh, it's 10 inches by 19 by 35, so you start making those cuts at those dimensions, but you got to take into account the thickness of the wood. So if they're standing up like this and I need a board and I need the box on the inside to be 35 inches, I have to take into account the thickness of both of these boards. So since both of them are 3/4 inch, that should be 1.5 inches. It's something that sounds really basic, but it's something that gets overlooked often, especially when you have multiple things that you're doing at the same time. It's easy to forget that you need to do that. So keep that in mind, don't forget it, and let's keep going. So I got these wheel well boxes cut and put together, and I kind of want to show you what I did. Earlier I think I said 19.5 inches tall. That was way too tall. I ended up going with 16 3/4 inches tall, and then with this I'm doing 1/4 inch plywood on top, so that'll make it 17 inches total. So forget what I said about the whole 19 inch. I don't know where I got that number from, but they look good. I haven't attached them yet. Let me show you what I did. So I used that handy dandy pocket jig. So you can see that I drilled all these holes here, and I can actually just take it out. So I'm planning on attaching it to the floor right here and right down there in those 3 spots. So that way it won't go anywhere. And then I added this on top so I could put that 1/4 inch plywood just to make the top of it nice and low, but still have some sturdiness to it. I haven't drilled it down to the floor yet because I'm going to take it out, paint it, and then throw it back in. So I let these wheel well boxes dry overnight. I put 2 coats on it because after the first coat you could still kind of see some of the primer. It was bleeding through, so I put a second coat on, let that dry, and attached it in. And I painted them black. And it kind of tells, you can kind of tell by the lighting, because I wanted it to kind of blend in and be not as noticeable. And also the cabinets that I'm going to be putting in are all going to be black paint on the bottom, so that will match those cabinets and it will hide it a little bit better. But all in all, I think they turned out pretty good. And that's a wrap, guys. The floors are in. I think they look awesome. So I'm going to end this video here. I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a like down below, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell. And if you haven't already, go follow my Instagram because I post daily updates on the van. Anyways, see you guys in the next one.